Well, actually, yeah, we haven't really talked about what detransition. What sparked that? That's kind of an obvious thing.
Yes. Um, so I think first of all, something that I did at when I was first starting to transition was just really romanticizing the whole entire thing to kind of like justify like what I was doing. Like, you're gonna, at the end of this, you're gonna come full circle and you're gonna, finally be a man and everyone's gonna see you as a man and it's going to, be this big, like victorious thing. And it turned out to not be that at all. Like, it wasn't that. It was very anticlimactic. And all I was kind of left with, even though I was like, had this new sense of social confidence that was sort of there and also sort of not there because I was still deeply insecure. Um, like I kind of thought that like transitioning would like fix all of my insecurities. And it really did not. Um,
Um,
uh,
I can you say more about that?
oh,
Because
like, I
that
mean,
could
I
be
was,
important. I want to know for people what things they can be dealing with potentially that they would.
well, I mean, just, male social pressures were now placed on me instead of female social pressures. And I was still, like a rather quiet, I was a pretty quiet, like not very masculine man. I was very like kind of a very passive guy and I was just insecure about that. Um I did in a way have more social confidence that again I think came with just like aging and like not being in high school anymore. Um, but yeah, it did not. What I think ultimately made me want to detransition was just the fact that the dissonance that was now there between my body and the way that I was portraying myself, the way that I was seen, um, made me feel very fragmented as an individual. And I was still always thinking about it. I would often get, just like, uh, I would just be going throughout my day and it would just dawn on me like, I'm a trans person. Like it was always something that was in the back of my head. Like, I'm trans. Nobody in here knows that I have, a vagina or that, that I was born a girl. Like I'm a trans person. I'm never going to like not be a trans person unless I detransition. But that at the time was like, no, you're not doing that. Um,
So what was the significance of that? You say I'm a trans person. What does that? What's so what?
it was always bugging me. Like I didn't, I, it's like, I felt very incoherent as an individual. And it made, life a lot more complicated.
So it was about you. It wasn't about what you associate with other people who are trans. It was just personal.
Yeah, no, I mean, some people can perfectly put up and live with that dissonance and some can't. And I am apparently a person who can't. Um, and then another thing, which is, more practical, was that I was, around 21 at this time, 22. I was starting to, come to understand that having biological children was actually, more important to me than I thought it was when I was 17. And I was aware that like the longer amount of time I spend on testosterone, the closer I, hypothetically come to needing to get a not a double mastectomy, I already had that, a hysterectomy, because of like the atrophy of my reproductive system, because it's not functioning. It wasn't functioning for 3.5 years.
Mhm.
So that's going to
I'm
lead to,
amazed that it works
it
after
works.
that.
It works. As far as I know, it works pretty all right. But if you're a female who's on testosterone for, 5+ years, that's gonna lead to a lot of sexual dysfunction, right? So a lot of trans guys who are on testosterone for 5+ years also end up getting a hysterectomy just to avoid, any kind of health issues
Mhm.
that come from that. So I did not want to get a hysterectomy because, there I didn't look at going on testosterone as being like um goodbye to any chance of fertility. A hysterectomy is really like really a final decision. Like there's nothing you can do. That's very irreversible. I think I can still get pregnant. I'm pretty sure I can. I mean, I don't know because I'm not trying to, but like,
well, I mean, to be specific, you did mention in your Q&A that you've got your periods back, so that's working.
yeah. So that's a good sign.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was another reason why I was like, well, I want to have kids. So that would involve me going off of testosterone. Now, going off of testosterone doesn't necessarily equate to I'm detransitioning. I'm going to go live as a girl now. I could have just stopped taking testosterone and just, continue to be a trans guy. It's not like anything like the only thing that really reverses is that like your fat kind of redistributes um, to a more female form and you get your periods back. Those are the two biggest changes, but going off of T isn't necessarily detransitioning. But for me, when I decided I was going to stop taking T, that was me also deciding to be like, I'm going to detransition and like go back to being Daisy and like living as a girl again. Just because of all of the other, feelings of doubt that I had prior to that didn't even have to do with like having kids.
When you talk about um, being trans but not being on testosterone, so that I take that to mean that you mean living as the opposite sex, essentially, like presenting yourself.
Yeah.
That's sort of your basic definition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there are two aspects of a gender transition. One is the social aspect, and one is the physical aspect. And I could have just stopped taking testosterone and remained socially as Ollie, and not gone on to like tell people like, hey, I'm going by Daisy and she her pronouns and like getting a new wardrobe and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if is there anything interesting to be said about going back to Daisy as a name rather than a new one. That just felt reasonable?
That just felt reasonable. Yeah.
Because I heard an account from someone else who she did this same thing, female to male to female, but she kept her male name because she said, this is what I've been using. I'm just going to keep it rather than changing it again, which also made sense to me. It makes it a bit interesting for people talking to her, but so that just seemed reasonable
Yeah.
because it also the other reason she cited was that it could seem, I forget exactly how it went, but like a regression, like whoops, that was a mistake, now I'm just going back to the way it was, whereas neither she nor I think you exactly view it as I just made a mistake and I'm going to do the best I can to reverse it. Like it's
No,
not
yeah.
exactly that. It is a progression. This is something I wanted to drill you on actually. Is it a progression?
I do see it as a progression, but I understand how it is also sort of reverting back to what I was before, that I'm trying to fix a mistake. The
Mhm.
other reason I don't like to call it a mistake is because I'm just a strict determinist and I don't, think that there's any point in having, regrets about things that we did. I think it's like, I don't want to say a waste of time because I'm very sympathetic to the idea of having regrets, but yeah, I see it as a progression. I guess with me changing my name and like, sort of going back to a presentation that I had post transition, it looks like I'm trying to fix a mistake. It just depends on how you view it, I guess. You could view it that way, or you could view it, not that way.
The
That's
thing is,
also,
I was going to say, how much um, do you feel you have actually developed your thinking, feeling, whatever since then? Because that's part of how I, not that it's a hugely important distinction, but that's part of what would make me call it just a flat out mistake or a development. There's a difference between a mistake you just reverse and something where, okay, it was a costly adventure, like a costly I
yeah,
don't want to say experiment, but
that's exactly what it is.
yeah.
I mean, again, it started out as a very experimental thing. I think I just took it too far, right? because when I first came out, I was like, I just want to see, I don't know, I still don't really know if I'm trans or not. But then eventually I kind of had to be like, you know, okay, I know that I'm trans, and that involves me, making these necessary steps. Um, so I think, yeah, calling it an experiment is, although it's kind of like scientific and spooky sounding, that is what it was, a costly experiment, um, which you could also frame as a mistake if you want, but it just is what it is.
Yeah. I guess, okay, I'm only going to ask one more question about this because I think of questions and I don't know if it actually is worth pursuing them. They just pop into my head. But is how much do you think you learned things by doing it that you wouldn't necessarily have learned by not doing it? Because if
And I'm
just
not
getting,
trans.
yeah, I mean, if getting old, I mean, if getting older was a major part of it, that would have happened anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have any sense of whether you think you would have, what would have happened if you didn't go through it?
That I would still be wondering if I was trans or not.
Uh-huh.
That's, I mean, that's obviously the biggest thing. That's
Uh-huh.
perhaps, the most obvious thing. Um, but yeah, that's one of the things that, like, I think if I had not gone through with it, I would still be wondering whether or not I should do it. Um, and I also think that it led to me problematizing my own, like, masculinity and my own femininity. Um, which I guess I'm like still working on, like understanding that, like, these traits, whether they're seen evolutionarily or culturally as feminine or masculine, are not inherently bad or problematic or things that need to be changed about you. So it's like a lot of it is just, really internalizing and accepting that being a gender non-conforming female is not a bad thing. It's literally fine. And that's what people told me. Like, that's what my parents told me, like, back when I first decided, like, yeah, I'm going to transition. They were like, why can't you just be a gender non-conforming woman? And of course, I would respond with, like, because I'm not a woman. It's like, you are, though.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I meant to ask you. One of the things that I was kicking myself for in our first talk was that I had not asked about the religiosity or conservatism of your family. Now, I didn't want to get into anything that you didn't want to talk about, but you mentioned that afterwards. And I know that is, at least I'd heard that was a typical aspect of like a typical transgender past, was that they had a conservative upbringing. And of course, this goes back to my quite simplistic first impressions when I started to become aware of the issue was, is it people who have a very black and white idea of what being male, female, masculine, feminine is? And so they just say, well, not this one because it's this one.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I mean, my family is conservative. They always have been, but they never tried to enforce that on me, and they never tried to force any religion on me. Like, we went, I went to Sunday school as a kid, but my parents were not fundamentalists by any means. And Fox News was on at my house, and I would, like, listen to my parents talk about their own political ideologies, but they never enforced it on me. They never tried to tell me, like, this is what is true and right. This is the way the world is. This
mhm.
is how you should conduct yourself. This is objectively the right way to be. There was none of that, right? So I don't think that the conservatism really had that much an effect on me, because they were, if anything, more economically conservative than culturally conservative. Um, but yeah,
So is there anything you think might be useful for anyone, me or other people, to understand about if about your parents saying, or anyone saying, couldn't you just be a non-conforming, non-gender conforming, whatever the phrase is, female, girl, woman? What what is it about that that didn't seem right?
the
Is
woman part,
um
that I had, I guess, a very, like, a more cultural definition of what a woman was than biological. Um, which again is why I find myself kind of sympathetic to the like rad femme gender critical ideology, which is that, making femaleness something that is, uh, strictly biological and not really affected, not ultimately affected by any of the like cultural tropes that we have, that there is something liberating about that. And there is something that um, is also very exclusionary and othering towards trans people in that, obviously. Which is kind of when I am like hesitant to say like, yeah, I'm gender critical. Um,
Maybe it should be another category, gender cautious.
I like that.
And you get to steal the C from critical, so no one knows who's what. Uh, um, was there something then about how do you think you felt about femininity, not as something that you had or didn't have, but about in other people? Did you have
Um,
I have read detransitioners who basically, and they probably fall into the category you're describing of gender non-conforming, who are very negative about the the typical feminine characteristics,
you mean, yeah, yeah.
or the idea of that being encouraged or whatever it is. So do you,
Again, I don't think that like you mean how I view it now.
no, I mean then, like when
Okay.
you say you had your problem with being a gender non-conforming woman at around the age of 17, was the woman part, did you have a problem with what you saw as being not just for you, but for anyone?
I mean, perhaps I it would have been very like it would have been pretty buried, I guess. Like I was not, outright like misogynistic or like, saw, but maybe there was something like, I guess, in my subconscious going on that like saw women as like inferior.
Well, or saw them as inferior, or the way that people responded to them as being undesirable.
Yeah, maybe both.
I'm just wondering how much it
That's,
was about how you felt about you, and whether it had to do also with how you felt about other people. It doesn't mean it was negative, or not trying to make it out to be anything more
yeah,
than just.
yeah. Um, well, I felt inferior to most of the women or girls, because this is like middle school, high school that I was around. Like when I saw people, comfortably inhabiting femininity, and that is like what made me feel inferior, I guess, is that I'm not like being a girl. I'm not clinging to, I'm not living out these gendered images and symbols accurately. That's why I don't have friends. That's why I feel like a social outcast, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm. Okay, so as far as um, you're talking about the how you felt in relation to femininity in high school, or girls in high school and so on. How did you think of your, like, where did you not measure up, if that's an accurate description? Where did you not match? What did you think of your appearance?
Well, I mean, when I was in eighth grade, I looked very, very masculine. Um, and I had like male role models that I looked up to and wanted to emulate. And you know, that's eighth grade is a weird time.
Mm-hmm.
Eighth grade is I think probably the weirdest time in most people's lives. Um, and there were just like very black and white implications of like, what my being masculine meant. It means that, you aren't going to be attractive to guys. You're not really you're you're different in a more negative way. Whereas when you grow, as you get older, being gender nonconforming is kind of seen as a more like cool thing, or I don't even know if that's true or if that was just my perception of it. But
Well, you
a
can
lot
do
of,
it so that people see it as refreshing and encouraging almost, I think. Like
yeah.
if you can pull it off in a particular way. Um, I think it potentially is more relaxing to people too. Like it's nice to not be hit with strongly sexual people that come across that way. And so to the extent that
Well, not
that
necessarily strongly sexual, but just like, long hair, makeup, like Aeropostale skirt, like that kind of thing. This was the most apparent to me in eighth grade, because that's typically when you start like dating and like trying stuff with the opposite sex, and like um that becomes like kind of, as an eighth grader, most of what you think about. At least it was, a lot of what I thought about is like, how am I supposed to act towards guys? Like, what is it like to date someone? What is it like to have a boyfriend? Um, and I felt like I was kind of locked out of that because of how like masculine I enjoyed being. I was like, well, I can't date a boy if I look like one. That was a
interest
big part of it.
it's interesting that the desire to present yourself that way was stronger than the desire to conform. Like even though you saw it as an equation almost, these are the benefits I could have, you still weren't doing it.
Yeah, no, I mean I did in high school, when I went into high school, because that was really when like it's like there'll be more opportunities to like to date and like all, make friends with people and become a person even more. There was like there was this big milestone. So then I remember being like, okay, when I go into high school, I'm going to grow my hair out and, conform as best as I can. Um, and I think junior year is when I kind of like, I guess, got tired of that. But instead of just, going back to, being a gender nonconforming girl, which is what I was in eighth grade, I was like, I need to somehow be conforming in a way that is like more genuine,
Mhm.
right? Because I was not gonna be like, I was not gonna be a gender nonconform. I was, but like I tried everything I could do, I guess, to conform as a guy as well. And
Mhm.
I felt insecure about, not being seen as like a typical guy. And I felt weirdly empowered and confident when I was doing stereotypically masculine things, like drinking beer or playing video games, which sounds so stupid to say out loud.
Not the
Like,
most sophisticated choices, but um,
no, no.
um, what about have you grown out of that, or do you still get
I
kick out of
really
that?
think I really hope so. I think I have.
I mean, I don't think people have to be completely developed in every respect. I was just curious. Okay,
I mean,
so
I'm almost 25. I'm 23. I better
yeah,
get on that, fully social mental development thing, because they
right.
say that, your brain is fully developed at 25. I don't know how accurate that is, but like,
Yeah, I'd say a lot of my interesting personality changes have occurred after 25, personally.
okay.
But then I'm a late bloomer, so who knows? Um, okay, so I think we're getting a bit shorter on time. The trying to, if we can just go through. Okay, so once you decide to detransition, you're starting to think about that. Something we haven't brought up at all here, but I think we have to because the degree to which you've addressed it in other videos is the religion thing.
Mhm.
Um, so what was with that? I'm already spoiling it by asking it that way.
What was with that? Well, I did already kind of publicly say that I'm not Christian anymore, so it's not, yeah. I
I
was in,
just mean that for the point of view of someone watching this who doesn't necessarily hasn't watched any of your videos.
yeah.
Um,
So I've always been really interested in religiosity, specifically Christianity. Um, specifically like Christian people and how they see things. um, and how that corresponds in the way that they live their lives. Um, and I think I, a part of me has always been very like not envious because that, uh, implies some kind of like bitterness or resentment, but yeah, like I envy their faith. I envy, that they have this idea that they are willing to die for, that they believe so much that they would die for it. And I was like, I don't really have any, you know, that's kind of, I feel like that's what I'm seeking in my life. Um, and I decided I wanted to see if I could like read the Bible, not read the Bible as though it is the literal truth and just kind of see what happens. Um, and essentially, I would not have called it this at the time. I had a friend actually accuse me of doing this to myself, and it really pissed me off at the time because I think deep down I knew that's what I was doing, but I was indoctrinating myself and trying to effectively like convert and change the way, because that seemed like the most meaningful way for me to actually convert. I didn't want it to be like this casual thing. I wanted to have it really change me. Um, and I don't know, like I think that a part of that, like what it sort of happened around the same time as me detransitioning. I think I started like calling myself a Christian pretty much around the exact same time that I stopped taking testosterone. And so when I made the video where I was talking about like my detransition, and the last third of it is me talking about, how I found God or whatever, I get a lot of comments being like, well, now you're just clinging to another ideology to conform to. Part of that's true, I think. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, I can't make myself believe something literally if I don't believe it literally. And maybe that's just, me lacking the sort of like Kierkegaardian element of like commitment to one's faith, is that like, no, it does involve risk, but the risk is not does not equate to doubt. Um, I think it's possible that I just like, if I can have proper faith in something, it's not fundamental Christianity.
But do you think that do you think then that what you were trying to do there was come up with something that in some way that did the same things as what living as a man would do?
It doesn't feel similar, honestly.
Because you sort of worded it that way, but I don't feel it either.
No, I don't think that I, was using it to replace it. Um, but it was very similar to the transition, and in that it was an experiment. But I wanted to, frame it as something that I was like dedicating myself to. Same thing with the transition, I guess. Um, but I just had a lot of cognitive dissonance with, how strictly I was trying to convert myself. I was really hard on myself during that time. I was really hard on myself for like not praying enough, or, thinking, certain thoughts. I'm like, is it okay that I'm having these these thoughts? Is this like not, is this like my original sin? Like, is this I was just using like that kind of language as a framework for my being. And I think I was like, it didn't stick, first of all. I started to like lose the faith around like right after I posted the detransition video, which was in October. And I remember thinking like while I was a Christian, like, man, I hope this is another one of my just like weird obsessions that like, is fleeting and comes and goes. I hope I do actually stick to this. Um, and then I did not. But yeah, I don't know. It really feels like my faith in that like dissolved. And I was like, maybe this is not, I just was not willing to stake my life on that. And I was like, if I can't get myself to stake my life on this, I shouldn't like just, try to be oppressive to myself and my thoughts because, it's making me kind of neurotic.
So I think I have three questions about that. It happened though, even if it wasn't, for lack of a better way of saying it, feeling whatever the same need or trying to achieve the same things as transition was, the timing is pretty remarkable. So why do you think it happened then? It's another way to get at that. Or do you know?
Well,
Like, do you really not know what happened?
well, I think a big part of it is because the reason why I was, I, because I was going to churches and stuff, like I was going to a bunch of different churches while I was trans. And being trans and being in a Christian environment can be tense. It's not necessarily the number one place where a person would be comfortable disclosing that. Um, and so whenever I was like going to these churches, I was like, no one can know that I'm trans. No one can know who I actually am. No one can actually know my story or know me intimately. And when you're in a church environment, like that's kind of the purpose. That at least I think that should be the purpose of a church environment. Um, and so when I detransitioned, it felt like something had lifted and it was like giving me more access to like really practice of being Christian. I felt like I could not be transgender and Christian at the same time. Now, I think that it is possible for other people. I think you can be trans and Christian at the same time. I just couldn't because, again, I seem to have a really hard time dealing with dissonance. Um, so yeah, I think that was it. And that's like that's very opposite of the gospel because people always say, like Christians always say, you don't fix yourself before getting saved and giving your life to Jesus. You give your life to Jesus and then he changes you. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? What do I just like, and there's a doctrine of like having your desires changed and having your attitudes change. It's just like magically. I mean, I know that's like a crass way to put it, but like
Well,
that's the supernatural element of it.
yeah,
Is
maybe. I
that,
mean, not to go on too much of a tangent, but I did. I wonder whether one sort of a psychological interpretation of prayer is that you're meditating on something intensely and you're also not choosing a particular way to achieve it. So you're very humbly setting something in mind and then looking for moment to moment ways to get there
yeah,
because it could be a sign. And and so I do wonder if there's a value in setting a clear goal and then rather than coming up with your idea how to achieve it, instead constantly paying attention to clues how to do it to get out of perhaps a pattern. And I did find that I was I meditated on the idea of I wanted to grow up in certain ways. And I
mhm.
actually felt like for months that it actually helped. Um,
But at the end of the day, isn't it still your independent decision though? Like, isn't it
I'm
like
not
your
making
action?
I think so, but that's because I don't think I believe in that sort of a God. I'm not sure what I believe in, but if it could be, like, I'm just saying that's the pattern that
Mhm.
it seems like it could work, whatever's
Yeah,
going on.
yeah. And prayer kind of involves like this really radical submission to, but if it's not a radical submission to yourself, then I don't know what you're submitting to. Like, I don't know how to get the self out of it, at least with like the Christian idea of like what prayer is. It's like, don't pay attention to your own needs and not needs, but don't pay attention of what you think you want, because your thoughts are deceptive. Your thoughts are not holy. You need a God to make you holy.
Mhm.
But so it involves a submission to something that is outside of you, to an entity that is outside of you, that doesn't have your thoughts, whose thoughts are higher than your thoughts. But it's like, I have a problem. I have a problem with the self aspect of it. How is it still not yourself? How is that idea of God not just, what it is, an idea?
Well, I would say, I personally, I'm not necessarily the person to ask, that I wouldn't know. Like, do I know whether something is coming from my subconscious or
Yeah.
my intuition, or is it
But a
coming?
lot of the Christians I've talked to like seem to have like this knowing, like they know. And
Maybe
it
that's the way they think
that's
of.
what I'm so interested in.
Yeah. But could it be like a creative? Okay, if we're going to view it non-theistically, maybe they're just right. But if we're going to view it non-theistically, couldn't it be their intuition and creativity comes up with something, and they don't? It does feel, as someone who dabbles in musical things, I can I've come up with respectable piano compositions, and I did not feel like I invented them. They
Oh
came
yeah,
up.
no, it's a really common thing.
Yeah.
Um, but it seems like such a necessary part to, the contemporary evangelical, just Christian life is sort of knowing that like, no, that wasn't me, that was God. And it was, I don't know what it like did to me psychologically. Maybe I'm just like too self-centered and I want everything to just be like everything comes from me. But I don't know what else it would.
Well, I don't know how you'd tell, but I can imagine it would feel like it didn't.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And
I'm
so
not.
I kind of was trying to convince myself that like literally every good thing that I did, which again, it's like, how do you define what good is? It like even the Bible doesn't really give a very like coherent answer. It gives some, helpful ideas of how you could answer that. But I was trying to convince myself that like any like good thing that I did any good charitable loving kind thing that I did was not actually me. That was the Holy Spirit working in me. It's like, okay. I'm not sure what to do with that. I'll try to accept it.
Is that something that is actually advised according to any denomination, or like that
um
sounds pretty weird to me.
I mean, it is, it's a common it's a common I guess we'll say doctrine, I guess, that I've noticed
Anything good is not because
is
of you.
not from me. No, the one thing about Christianity is that it really antagonizes the self. Um, like it it antagonizes the self, but at the same time, um, it says that the self can be worthy of, living with God and being holy, and can be worthy of heaven, however you want to define that. That's a whole other thing. um, so there's a lot of dissonance in just in the doctrine itself. I don't want to say contradictions because like I don't know. I don't like the idea like the Bible has contradictions in it. It's like, okay, um, it has dissonant ideas in it, but that's because it was written by people. Oh, and that was another thing, like biblical interpretation. Um, Seeing the Bible as something that is holy and infallible and literally the word of God. When you quote scripture, when you quote things from the New Testament, you don't say Paul said this, you say God through Paul said this. I couldn't really get myself to buy into that either. Like what is holy inspired word? Why is this the only text that is, inspired by something holy, and no other work of text can have some, like nothing by that was written by, I know I mentioned Kierkegaard a lot, but like nothing was that was written by like Kierkegaard or Simone Weil or um, Tolstoy or any writer um, can be said to have been divinely inspired. It's only the Bible. Maybe I'm like, and then I, start thinking like, maybe I'm taking this too literally. It's like, no, well, if you don't take it literally, you're going to run into the trap of not knowing what to follow, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's weird. And I think people said this in the comments. It seems weird, particularly for you, to gravitate towards that brand of Christianity, that flavor. Like there are a lot, and I don't know much about them, but it's the intensity of it was the point, right? From what you said.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't watched like the last part of my detransition video because I don't, like I said, I don't like watching videos of myself where I say things that I now think are wrong. um, that's what makes me cringe a lot. But uh, yeah, I understand why people found it, I was a little embarrassed about talking about it. I wasn't thrilled to be making a video about my religious beliefs, but honestly, my boyfriend really convinced me to do it. He was like, this is like really important and you are good at talking about this. I'm like, I am like pretty good at talking about this. And like, I think it's important for some reason, but I didn't know why it was important. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
I don't want to like, I'm no longer comfortable talking about, like, yes, I understand I'm talking about it now, but I don't want my channel to be like religion focused anymore, because that's one thing where like you, I don't want it to come off like I'm telling people how to live their lives, or that I'm telling people that like their belief in God is irrational, because that's just like, why would I do that? Who's that helping?
Yeah, who wants to watch that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that is a genre. That's definitely like, there is a niche, on YouTube. Um, YouTube is great. There's just like a niche and genre for every single conversation one could possibly have.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to wrap this up. I've got all sorts of things I wanted to get to. Um, why are you talking about this so much? I don't get a feeling that you've ever been trying to convince anyone of anything. Why are you talking about it so much? Whether it's religion, whether it's gender.
Um,
I don't have a sense of why you're talking to me, really. Like, it's nice that you said that you like talking to me. That could be useful if I want to have you on again. We talked about doing more, but why? What are you up to?
I think my what I'm up to changes a lot depending on like just what I have come to discover in my life. Uh, and I don't know, I value the sharing of perspectives just for themselves, not necessarily to like try to change culture or try to change, the way one person thinks about something. Like, I'm not someone who is like, I have this ideology and it would make me so happy if someone else would have the same ideology as me. Like, I would love to just change somebody's mind. Um, if I manage to change someone's thinking about something, that's like cool and all, but it's just not my goal. Now, what is my goal? I don't know. I have just enjoyed myself on this platform and I keep coming back to it. Um, and maybe I am just in it for fun and giggles. Maybe I, don't have like a meaningful, noble like goal. Like, I'm not a social activist type. Like, I don't feel the need to protest or try to change people. I like to share my opinion, but I think like you, I don't have the idea of trying to enforce my opinion on someone else. And I guess if you give your opinion and give your reasoning for your opinion, that's sort of inherently there. Um, but it's not my goal. Um, Sometimes I'm uncomfortable with the fact that I make YouTube videos about what I make YouTube videos about because it doesn't feel like real life, you know.
I don't know.
YouTube is not real life. I mean, it is, but it's not. And sometimes I worry if it like, makes me less employable. Um, my boyfriend argues that it like is good, that it, is beneficial, that like it's something that I should put on my resume, but I'm like, I don't like, there's a reason why I don't talk about my YouTube channel in my real life. Like I don't talk to my coworkers about it. I don't want them, like if my coworker came up to me and was like, hey, I found your YouTube channel. I watched all of your YouTube videos. I would be like a little bit horrified. So while it is public, there is a sort of separation um, of like online stuff in real life. So yeah, I mean, sometimes it like freaks me out that I have sort of like hundreds of thousands of people who have seen me and heard me speak speak out about really inherently controversial and personal things, but
Hundreds of thousands. That's on one video.
mhm.
Is that your Jordan Peterson video or?
And my detransition video has like over 300,000.
Oh, I should have checked. I would have thought it was more like, okay, I didn't realize it was that high. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Since I've started my channel again, I'm very attentive to people's numbers. No, I won't check it. I was going to check online. But well, I said I don't know what you're up to, but actually I have a feeling. I don't know if it's right. And it goes along with something we never talked about that I want to talk about. I brought my
Please do.
Enneagram books and we never
Oh,
even got
nice.
into it. But and for those who don't know, the Enneagram is a personality typing system, which may or may not be useful to people. But it feels like you just express. Like that's what you do.
Yeah,
Not
pretty
what
much.
else you do.
Yeah. And
Which
I
is,
hate that that's my goal because again, I hate how self-centered I am.
but
But
that's the art. I think this is relevant to my channel too. Is that I I have this idea of one way of looking at an artist is someone who is self-involved, self-absorbed, self-indulgent, and if all goes well, as they dig around with their own thoughts and feelings and express it in some way, it's actually useful to other people. Um, Hopefully, that's the theory, and
yeah,
people keep them
and
around.
people have told me that they see my videos as valuable to them. If I would, if I wasn't, honestly, if I wasn't getting like any attention at all, not even that it's just the attention that I thrive off of, but just, if I wasn't getting any sort of feedback and people weren't saying like, you know, your expression has affected me, has impacted me, then I probably wouldn't be doing it.
Mhm. But that's also a natural thing as a way of assessing if what you're doing
Right.
is worth doing. Um,
Exactly.
it also, I found just in recording my intro, my new intro, and the old one probably, but the way I did it is I couldn't make myself write notes. Maybe I did at one point, but so what I did is I would have a vague idea of what I want to say, and then I'd record it and say, okay, that was half an hour, and it wasn't very precise, and then I'd do
Mhm.
it again. And so I just spent an afternoon getting it shorter and more precise till I had one that's I think 13 minutes long, and I thought, yeah, I basically hit everything I wanted. And it
Mhm.
felt so good to say, yes, that's what I meant.
Yes, that's a very satisfying feeling.
And one of my favorite things is to go for a walk, not knowing exactly what some feeling, some memory, something I'm trying to understand, some interaction, and I had a feeling about it, and make it from this vague thing till I can say what it was, why I'm thinking about it, why it matters, and
Yeah.
so it seems like it's that kind of a thing.
It seems like that is what I'm doing. Just trying to articulate.
I'm wondering if there's any last things we should end this with. I did think it would be fun sometime if you administered the Enneagram test on me, just because
That would, yeah, that would be great. I love
we,
administering the Enneagram test on people.
it's been a long time since I thought about it. I haven't taken these books off the shelf in a long time, like could be years, because I did find what one would be afraid of with some sort of personality scheme or typing system, where I got to the point where I was more familiar with the system than with people in the world almost, and I would try to impose it on them once I identified them. And it was partly fun, but I just mean, as opposed to it helping me make sense of people, I was trying to make sense of them according to the scheme, if that makes sense. Anyways, that's the second time
Yeah,
actually where I've run into it.
I tend to do that too a little bit. Like you talking about like typing people.
Yeah,
I tend to do that too a little bit, just because it's fun to think about and analyze people. But
it can be helpful. I just, as I say, I just found that I got to the
yeah,
point where I was overdoing it, but I still think it has some use as a systematic way of trying out theories. Like, oh, I got into it as something for me. I thought, oh, that sounds like my key problem. How do
yeah,
I fix it?
yeah,
Anyways, yeah, so it might be a fun thing, and I'd like it if I'm not just interviewing someone all the time. It's nice to turn the tables around and change things a bit. So I don't think I don't think either of us really wants to address any more questions. Is there anything else you think we should mention at the end going forward? Anything? I don't think there is, probably. I'll put your information in the description. And yeah, so I'll let you know when this goes up and all that.
Oh, yeah,
How
no,
I
I
can
know.
wrap this up with a bow, but I haven't
I've
come up with.
always been bad at wrapping things up with a bow and writing conclusions to, long essays, that kind of thing.
Well, oh, no, I want to just put these up and not really worry about it too much, and see what happens. It'll be interesting to see how many people who follow you over onto my channel, and what happens. Oh, I do want to say, if anyone wants to contact me because they would like, I'm digging myself in a huge hole here. If someone would like to talk to me about any of this stuff, not from the point of view of me knowing anything, but from the point of view of them knowing something, I would consider talking to them or emailing or something. I want to take in information, and one of the exciting things is I don't know who I might meet or learn from in this, and so we'll see where that goes. But there certainly are other things that we could talk about, so we can perhaps do that in the future. Probably when we're done, at least for me, I'll think of things I wish I'd said or not said, so maybe in the future we can address those. And yeah, I guess I'll stop talking.